WWE didn't stay on top for over 40 years by luck. They positioned themselves as something totally different, and that changed the game. I'm breaking this down from two angles, as a wrestling fan and a brand strategist. Now, before we get into this video, let's talk about the history of WWE. It's very long, but for the sake of this video, I'll keep it brief. Before WWE became the global powerhouse it is today, let's go back to the territory days prior to 1982. Back then, you had many regional territories across the US, all governed by the National Wrestling Alliance. Each had their own local TV deals, local marketing, and talent. Also, the WWE, which was originally the Capital Wrestling Corporation, separated from the NWA in 1963, renaming themselves as the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. In 1982 is when things really started to shake up in the wrestling world, thanks to Vincent Kennedy McMahon, a man who is both seen as a visionary and a villain. He purchased the company from his father and renamed it the World Wrestling Federation because he wanted to revolutionize the world of wrestling by taking it nationally. Vince never told his father his vision for turning wrestling into entertainment. Vince's vision started to take form. However, success did not come easy for Vince, and he would be met with huge backlash and competition. As Vince wanted to take his product nationally, other promotions that had TV deals on lock. Saturday, July 14th, 1984 is when things got ugly. Vince, due to purchasing a controlling interest in NWA promotion Georgia Championship Wrestling, aired WWF programming on GCW's time slot. Imagine you're sitting at home chilling on a Saturday evening getting ready to watch your favorite TV show, but something else comes on instead. You'd be mad too, right? The reason why this didn't work is because the WWF programming was a flop, and this is due to the major differences between the WWF and other promotions. WWF's product was way more over the top and more character driven, and other promotions like the NWA and AWA were more sports driven. However, WWF would rebound from this failure by establishing a partnership with MTV, which was known as the Rock and Wrestling Connection. Now, this was due to WWF manager Lou Albano appearing in Cyndi Lauper's Girls Just Want to Have Fun hit single. And a storyline was formed in the aftermath of this. And MTV broadcast the first live wrestling match on cable TV on July 23rd, 1984, called The Brawl to End It All, and WWF wrestlers continued to appear in Cyndi Lauper's music videos. Now, at the time, this was a shocking yet strategic move by the WWF because it allowed them to get more eyes on their product. At the time, MTV had become massively popular, and the WWF took advantage. In 1985, the WWF created WrestleMania, which would become their biggest event of the year. Vince McMahon threw all his eggs in one basket, banking on the success of WrestleMania. The future of the World Wrestling Federation was hanging in the balance. WWF promoted WrestleMania as the Super Bowl of professional wrestling, which was a high-profile supercard event, which was nothing new at the time, but what was new was the introduction of celebrities like Mr. T and the aforementioned Cyndi Lauper and Muhammad Ali. Because of this, WrestleMania was a huge success. Now, the key lesson in this is that there is no reward without risk. If you believe in your vision strongly and are willing to put in the work, despite opposition and challenges, then you got a shot. And the key move here was introducing sports entertainment as a new category. Vince McMahon didn't see his product as just professional wrestling. He coined the term sports entertainment, which was a marketing move to potential advertisers and to prevent being subjected to regulations like other competitive sports. So what is sports entertainment? Sports entertainment is the combination of both spectacle and athleticism. Think of it as an athletic performance for fans. And the key takeaway here is that great branding doesn't just improve a product, it changes how the product is perceived. Now that we've covered WWE's history, let's touch base on WWE's core brand. They're all about storytelling, spectacle, and emotion. Week after week, this is seen in their weekly shows and premium live events. And their mission is to provide entertainment for all ages at 52 weeks a year. Now, I know other people will say if you try to appeal to everyone, you will appeal to no one. While this is true in most cases, WWE tends to define this. WWE delivers a family-friendly entertainment product 52 weeks a year, non-stop across their main shows, Raw, NXT, Evolve, SmackDown, exclusive shows, and monthly premium live events. And all off season, all gas, no breaks with it. Now, I'm not gonna lie to y'all, sometimes I find myself exhausted as a fan trying to keep up with everything that's happening in WWE. That's why I stick to social media and YouTube highlights. And the key here is they created their own category. They created a lane for themselves and they are dominating it, and that is what I encourage you to do. Define what separates you from the pack. Now, if you're having trouble with this, here's something that I found very helpful. Your unique experiences, ideas, and perspectives are what make you different. No one is the same. Now let's move on to merchandising, media, and how they capitalize on the mainstream. WWE's merchandise is key to the fan experience. Fans want to feel like they're a part of the show as they wear merchandise of their favorite wrestlers and replica championships. As a WWE fan, I've collected many shirts, video games, and action figures over the years, some of which I still have to this day. WWE produces various forms of media, weekly shows, premium live events, exclusive series, music, and movies on a consistent basis. And it's established in the 1980s rock and wrestling era. WWE continues to collaborate with celebrities and big-name athletes. Now, I mentioned Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper, so here are a few modern examples. Let's talk about Logan Paul, who is a controversial figure. Logan Paul, who is one of the most popular YouTubers in the world, officially signed with WWE as a WWE superstar. You have Ice Show Speed, who is one of the most popular streamers in the world, appeared in the 2025 Royal Rumble, live streaming the event from his perspective, and he had a viral moment getting speared by WWE superstar Braun Breaker. Let's talk about Bad Bunny, who is one of the most streamed artists in the world, who faced off against WWE superstar Damian Priest in his home country of Puerto Rico at Backlash 2023. And Tyrese Halliburton and Jalen Brunson. Now, WWE basically predicted the 2025 Eastern Conference Finals by having Tyrese Halliburton and Jalen Brunson show up on an episode of SmackDown and have a face-off against each other in the middle of the ring. And they continuously do this on a weekly basis because if you're watching an episode of Raw, NXT, or SmackDown, you'll sometimes see celebrities in the audience. Alright, so let's move on to the brand evolution. WWE's brand evolved over time, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Let's talk about the golden era from 1984 to 93. And this was all about the superheroes, the mainstream, family-friendly, over-the-top product. Now, the fan reaction is that they loved the spectacle, but some wrestling purists found it cartoon. And what triggered this was the growth of cable TV, the growth of MTV, and the aftermath of WrestleMania. And the lesson here is to create big moments that people never forget. Now let's move on to New Generation from 93 to 97. This was all about a cleaner image. This is when the WWE decided to focus more so on youth and more technical talent rather than the swole, larger-than-life wrestlers. And this was a mixed reaction from the fans. You had people like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels carrying the company, but the larger-than-life stars were on their way out. And what triggered this was the huge steroid scandal. It was like the early 90s. You can do more research on that. I won't get into all the details of it. You can do more research on the steroid trials surrounding Vince McMahon. It was a huge controversy going on at the time. And also, the big name stars like Hulk Hogan and Macho Man, they started to move to other companies. They went to WCW around this time. And the key lesson here is to rebuild with your strengths, even if it takes time. WWE had to rebuild. Even though they saw the big names leaving, they had to move to the other wrestlers who were very willing and very capable of carrying the company. Now, honestly, this was the era where they started to see a massive dip in the quality of the product. They started to see their lowest ratings and people weren't buying tickets as much. People weren't really investing in the product because they either grew out of it or they just didn't find it interesting anymore. Now let's move on to the Attitude Era, which is regarded by fans as one of the best eras of all time. This was from 97 to 2002. This was all about being edgy, rebellious, unpredictable. And what triggered this was the WCW competition and the cultural shift that was happening around that time. During the 90s, it was all about rebellion. You start to see it in the TV shows. You start to see it in movies and pop culture. It was all about rebellion, and WWE had to capitalize on this. And the key lesson here is that sometimes a complete rebrand is what saves your business. They start to see record numbers. They had their highest TV ratings, highest ticket sales, highest pay-per-view numbers. They blew up around this time. Now let's move on to the ruthless aggression era, which is the era that I personally grew up in. It was just from 2002 to 2008. And the key focus of this brand is all about new stars, physicality, and the brand split. You start to see Raw and SmackDown, which was their two major shows, they started to become separate brands in themselves. The fan reaction was a bit mixed because it took a lot of time for the fans to warm up to the ruthless aggression era, because the big names like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock were leaving. They were on their way out the door. And let's talk about the PG era, which was from 2008 to 2013. The PG era was all about going back to that family-friendly, corporate-safe, polished product. And the hardcore fans hated this because they got tired of John Cena being positioned as the main guy. And what triggered this was the Chris Benoit tragedy. I won't go into all the details of that. Again, you have to look this stuff up because it is a lot. It was a very tragic situation. And key lesson here is to don't ignore your reputation. Adapt before it's too late. WWE had to clean up their act. Had to implement a whole wellness policy just so situations like that wouldn't even happen again. Now let's talk about the WWE reality era from 2014 to 2016. Now this was all about being more fan aware. WWE started to take the reactions that they were getting from the fans and use it for their storylines and kind of turn it against them. Triple H basically cut a scathing promo on the fans, basically roasting them for complaining about the product. And he was saying stuff like,
"Me and my friend Mark, we're gonna stop watching.
If we don't get what we want, we're gonna stop watching," which was basically the fan sentiment at the time. The fans had really started to become very vocal. They took to Twitter, they took to social media and voiced their frustrations about the product at the time, which was, the product at the time was, there was less wrestling, there was more talking and less wrestling going on, especially on the women's side. You had a lot of, and the fans were very vocal about, especially the women's matches, and that led to, the whole Give Divas a Chance movement on Twitter. I remember that was a thing, like back in 2015. Fans were advocating for WWE to give the women more opportunities. And I was very on board with that because at that time, I hated to see the women get the short end of the stick. The women were competing in 3-minute matches, 2-minute matches. Not much storylines were being developed on the women's side. It wasn't focused on their athleticism. It was more focused on their attitude. Like, heck, they were even called divas at the time, which carried a negative connotation. WWE really had to clean that up, which I'm really glad they did, because right now women's wrestling is in a huge place right now. Women's wrestling is really on top. I digress. So the key here is to adapt. You have to learn to adapt. If you don't, you get left behind and you alienate your core audience. This leads to the new era from 2016 to 2022. And this was all about global expansion, diversity, and athleticism. And fans started to react more positively to this era because they started to see more people coming in from the independent scene, like AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura. They started to come in and make a name for themselves in WWE. And like I mentioned, women's wrestling started to become more serious. WWE started taking women's wrestling more seriously because you had people like the Four Horsewomen, Charlotte, Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, and Bayley. And what triggered the new era was the changing audience and the global growth strategy. WWE started to focus on more global expansion. And that's why they brought a lot of international stars in, because they wanted to expand their brand globally, which they were already global, but they wanted to lock in even further on becoming a global brand. And the key lesson here is that representation and long-term storytelling equals loyalty. Now let's talk about the rebirth era, which is the current era. Now, this is all about long-form storytelling, collaboration, and this era has had the most positive reception for the past decade. Now, however, there has been recent concerns with TKO because they now own WWE, and what triggered this was Vince stepping down as the head honcho of WWE and Triple H taking over the creative side of things. And like I mentioned, fans have been concerned with TKO coming in and buying WWE. And here are some of the concerns that fans have had. WWE loves to brag about breaking all kinds of records with their ticket sales and their numbers. They love to talk about how well they're doing on the financial side. And this is because they have raised their prices significantly. Let's be real here. WWE has seen massive growth numbers wise because they raised their tickets. WWE is no longer affordable, and fans have been very vocal about that. And also, you got advertisements galore. Like if you're watching an episode of Raw, you'll see a bunch of advertisements splattered all across the ring and all on the side of the ring. It's like advertisements everywhere. Like you can't even watch a match. Now I get it. They're a business and their goal is to make money, but come on, you have to have a balance. You have to have a balance between the quality of your product and advertisements. WWE has always had advertisements, but it was never to this degree. Now, from the creative side of things, from 2022 to 2024, WWE was at its creative peak. Fans started to become more interested, and a lot of fans who gave up on WWE years ago came back to WWE. Now, the key with this particular era is that listening to your audience is your best brand strategy. You gotta know what your audience wants, and you have to be willing to listen and adapt. WWE has created loyalty within their brand by establishing characters and storylines. Now, WWE didn't always pivot by choice. Sometimes the culture changed. They didn't always get it right, but they always kept adapting. They stayed on top by positioning themselves outside of the ring. Position yourself intentionally. Pivot with strategy, not panic. How has the WWE been so successful all these years? It's not just wrestling, it's storytelling. Over decades, WWE has mastered the art of building larger-than-life characters and stories that can only be described as cinema. Let's talk about the fundamentals of WWE storytelling, which is conflict plus character equals engagement. Let's talk about some of the key storylines in WWE history, starting with the Yes Movement. This movement was centered around Daniel Bryan, who is one of the best technical wrestlers in the world, and he knew he was. However, he didn't have the look that a typical WWE superstar had, and was seen as a B-plus player, a wrestler whose role is to simply make the top stars look good. In 2013, Bryan captured the WWE Championship only to lose it to Randy Orton a few minutes later. Triple H, who we'll come back to later, who was the special referee in that match, formed an alliance with Randy Orton, along with Triple H's wife, Stephanie McMahon, and they were known as the Authority. For months, the Authority sought to put Daniel Bryan in his place every chance they got, but the fans got behind Daniel Bryan more and more, using his signature yes chant as the battle cry and tweeting their frustrations out. Fans got sick of the Authority because they would come out almost every week and talk your ears off for 30 minutes when you just want to see some wrestling. So Daniel Bryan challenged Triple H to a match at WrestleMania 30. Then one night on Raw, which was the first Raw I ever attended, Daniel Bryan had fans flood the ring demanding that Triple H accepts his challenge. Triple H accepted with the stipulation that whoever won the match would be added to the WWE World Heavyweight Championship match at WrestleMania 30 between Randy Orton and Batista. Daniel Bryan beats Triple H and goes on to defeat Orton and Batista to become the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. And the reason why this storyline is so significant is because it showed the power of the fans using their voice. The fans demanded that Daniel Bryan get his moment in the spotlight. Now let's talk about Becky Lynch. One woman who started her own revolution was Becky Lynch. Becky had been struggling to climb her way to the top. She would get a big win every now and then, only to have the rug pulled out from under her later. Now, fans got behind Becky because they saw themselves in her. She was the Irish lass kicker, a gritty underdog who became tired of having moments stolen from her. At 2018 SummerSlam, fans saw a new side of Becky. Becky had earned a championship match Charlotte Flair who was heavily favored by the higher-ups in WWE, inserted herself into the match. Charlotte, Becky's friend at the time, won the match and fans were pissed. They thought that Becky was finally gonna get her big moment, but WWE said, nah fam. Becky beat the brakes off Charlotte after the match justifiably. And just like that, Becky added a new layer to her character. She woke up and realized who in the world she was. She became more aggressive and more brash, which led to her becoming the first women's double champion at WrestleMania 35 and the first women's main event in WrestleMania history. Fans loved it and Becky Lynch became a megastar. This storyline showed that the importance of not being passive and fighting for what you want in life. Now, let's move on to arguably the best WWE storyline ever produced, the Bloodline. I could go all day talking about this storyline, but for the sake of this video, I'll keep it brief. Now, this storyline revolves around the Anoa'i family, a multi-generational Samoan dynasty in WWE. Roman Reigns, the appointed tribal chief, which is the leader of the family, forms a group called the Bloodline, along with his cousins, Jimmy and Jey Uso, Solo Sikoa, Roman's manager and wise man, Paul Heyman, and Sami Zayn, who was temporarily brought in as an honorary member of the family because of his loyalty. From 2020 to 2025, this family went from loyalty to dominance to betrayal to fallout, and us fans were along for the ride. What a roller coaster that storyline was. Every week we tuned in to see the latest twists and developments of the Bloodline story. The Bloodline story is considered by many as the storyline that brought a lot of fans back. Now, the key lesson here is that as a brand or creator, your content needs character, payoff, and emotional connection. Now, here's what you can do to establish these. For character, think about your target audience. Your audience is the main character, not you. You are the guy who helps solve their problems. In WWE, this would be the manager. Managers have played a key role in the development of characters. Think of them as supporting characters. Now, the manager's objective is to set their client up for success and provide guidance along the way. Your objective as a small business owner or content creator is to address your audience's pain points and guide them to the solution. All right, so a few questions you need to ask yourself is, who are they? What do they do? What platforms are they on? And what are their pain points? And what is the payoff? What does the audience get in return when they purchase your product, your service, or engage with your content? Now, here's a hack that I've learned. For my small business owners, instead of selling the features of your product or service, sell the transformation. Now, here's an example of that. If you're a fitness coach selling a personal training program, sell the improvement in your client's quality of life once they complete the program. Case in point, WWE doesn't sell wrestling. They sell drama, nostalgia, excitement, spectacle, belonging. These are WWE's core values. Now, another element of WWE storytelling is long-term booking and long-term character arcs. Going back to Roman Reigns and the Bloodline, that story can be traced all the way back to June 2nd, 2014. At the time, Roman, along with Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose, now known as Jon Moxley in All Elite Wrestling, were a highly popular and notorious group known as The Shield, who ran roughshod over WWE. On that night, Seth Rollins stabbed Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose in the back. And even though Roman evolved into a main eventer after, got about nor forgave Seth for what he did, which cost Roman big time. It cost him the undisputed championship at WrestleMania 40 last year. During a critical moment in the match, Roman had a choice to either hit Cody Rhodes, who he was facing, or Seth Rollins with a steel chair. He chose Seth, and Cody took advantage. The best stories take the viewer on a journey with each character. Now, the takeaway with this is to build your brand narrative with layers. Do not be afraid to play the long game. Long-term storytelling wins all day. Now, another element of WWE storytelling is the commentary. And commentators are really the unsung heroes of WWE and are just as important as the wrestlers. They play a key role in WWE's storyline development as WWE's storyteller. Their job is to communicate to millions of people on a weekly basis what is taking place both in the ring and outside of the ring. Now, over the years, I have become just as fascinated with the commentary aspect as I am with the storylines. Commentators like Jim Ross, Jerry the King Lawler, Gorilla Monsoon, and Michael Cole have mastered the art of conveying emotion to the audience as they are reacting and commenting on the storylines and wrestling taking place. Now, a perfect example of this is the dynamic between Jim Ross and Triple H. Triple H was a heel, which is a bad guy, who did whatever it took to get to the top and stay on top of WWE. Jim Ross's role as the lead commentator during Triple H's peak run in WWE was massive. JR made sure to tell the audience just how dirty and low down Triple H was on a weekly basis. We knew it was all storyline, but JR made us believe it was real because of how passionate he was in his commentary. See for yourself.
Does he have no conscience? Does he have no heart? Do you have no soul? You son of a...
Your brand voice matters. It's how people make sense of your content. How are you communicating your story to your audience? Now, there's actually a term for storylines that is used in the wrestling world called kayfabe, like I mentioned previously. And what kayfabe is the illusion that storylines were real. For decades, wrestlers have went to great lengths to protect kayfabe, acting as their character in real life settings because they didn't want to ruin the mystique of their character. If a wrestler broke kayfabe, that could lead to serious consequences. And The Undertaker is the ultimate example of this. For 30 years, The Undertaker character, who was known for being dark and mysterious, having very little to say. For decades, Mark Calloway, the man portraying The Undertaker, rarely did interviews and appearances outside of wrestling because he wanted to preserve The Undertaker persona. Only recently has Mark Calloway started to show more of himself outside of the ring. He currently has a podcast called 6 Feet Under with The Undertaker, where he shares his experiences as a wrestler and his thoughts on the current product and interviewing other wrestlers. Now, I did mention Triple H. Let's go back to Triple H for a moment. Triple H, in his rookie year, along with his friends Shawn Michaels, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash, infamously broke kayfabe during the show in 1996 known as the Curtain Call. To make a long story short, Triple H was a bad guy at the time and Shawn Michaels was a good guy at the time. It was an unwritten rule for good guys and bad guys to not interact with each other out of character during shows and after shows. All four wrestlers, after a non-televised match between Shawn Michaels and Kevin Nash, hugged in the middle of the ring as they said goodbye to Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, who were heading to World Championship Wrestling, a top rival to WWE at the time. Triple H and Kevin Nash were the bad guys, and Shawn Michaels and Scott Hall were the good guys. The only wrestler that got punished during that incident was Triple H, and here's why. Shawn Michaels was the WWE champion, and at the time he was favored very heavily by management, and Nash and Hall were out the door, so there was no reason to punish them. So Triple H took the fall from that. But however, Triple H bounced back from that later on. A key insight here is maintaining brand consistency is basically the modern version of protecting kayfabe. While professional wrestling is scripted, your brand is as real as it gets, and you should treat it as such. Now this is done through showing up consistently, knowing who you are, and what your audience wants. Now, there is a new show that is premiering on Netflix called WWE Unreal, and by the time y'all see this, it will already be on Netflix. It gives us a behind the scenes look at the writer's room as they develop storylines, and this has a lot of people talking. Now, many fans are concerned that this series will ruin kayfabe. Like I mentioned, the illusion the storylines are real, but let me push back on this for a bit. It's not 1989. Everyone knows that pro wrestling is scripted. Now, looking at it from a creative standpoint, I'm interested in seeing how the writers come up with storylines and keep them consistent over time. As a fan, however, I'd rather watch storylines play out on TV. But as a creator, I'm curious about the process behind it. I'll probably do a deep dive on WWE Unreal in a future video. But what happens when too much is revealed? This question perfectly sums up the fan criticism of WWE Unreal, fearing that WWE is revealing too much with this series. Now, a lot of fans would much rather watch the storylines play out on TV, which is totally understandable. Now, here is a question that I would propose to you. How much of your process should you show? Does transparency help or hurt? Now, I will say that being transparent can be risky. As a small business owner or creator, it is entirely up to you how transparent you want to be with your brand. You don't have to tell everything. You can choose which parts of your brand that you want to show. Now, what can you as a small business owner or creator learn from this? Storytelling isn't just entertainment, it's a tool. Storytelling is vital. If you are not attaching a story to your brand, then your audience will be less likely to engage with you. Now, how do you do this? Simply tell the story of how your brand came to life. Instead of just providing facts, describe how you were feeling at the time, if you're comfortable, and why your brand exists. Now, let's talk about how to build your own storytelling framework. In a story, you have a protagonist, you have conflict, you have transformation, then you have a payoff. Let's break this down. Every story starts with a protagonist, the main character of the story. The main character runs into a challenge or a problem that needs to be solved. The main character finds a solution to their problem. The main character overcomes their challenge as a result. 3 big takeaways from this video is that storytelling builds loyalty, every brand needs a voice, and consistency matters. WWE storytelling isn't perfect, but it works. And if you apply these lessons to your brand, you'll connect deeper, grow faster, and create impact. In January of 2024, WWE signed a $5 billion deal with Netflix. You heard me, billion. But what if I told you that this deal wasn't random? It was years in the making. So how did WWE and Netflix make this deal happen? In 2014, WWE launched their own streaming service called the WWE Network, which was the exclusive home for all WWE content, including weekly shows, monthly pay-per-views, a wide vault of archival content, and exclusive shows, all for the low price of just $9.99. And the fans loved the network because of how seamless everything was and the consistent price, compared to other streaming platforms like Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon Prime. For example, if you wanted to watch a specific match at any point in time, all you had to do was just search for it and it would pop up. In 2021, WWE inked a deal with NBC Universal, making Peacock the exclusive US home for content on the WWE Network, thus putting it into the WWE Network streaming service. This deal was reportedly worth over $1 billion over a 5-year period, and the WWE Network content was moved over to Peacock. The Peacock deal allowed WWE to expand to a wider audience at a lower price point. The Peacock deal was a test run for Netflix because it allowed WWE to prove their value on a platform outside of their own and capitalize on the ever-growing streaming market. However, the fans were not having it with this new deal. Fans were used to the WWE Network because it offered great value at a fair, consistent price point. The WWE content that would be shown on Peacock would be heavily censored to meet NBC's standards and limited. The fan outrage was definitely justified. Now, however, despite this, the WWE Peacock deal worked because it expanded the WWE's audience and it made them more money. WWE's deal with Peacock, announced in early 2021, guaranteed WWE approximately $200 million per year for US streaming rights, totaling over $1 billion across 5 years. This revenue far exceeded what WWE was bringing in from its own network direct-to-consumer service, which generated around $132 million annually in the US when subscriptions plateaued by 2019. And while we're on the topic of markets, WWE's social media presence has grown exponentially over the years. Right now, you can find WWE content across social media platforms such as YouTube, X, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, you name it. They are consistently using social media to bring more eyes to the product through weekly storyline progression. And most WWE wrestlers are active on social media as well, to add more depth to their storylines and to promote themselves. Now, in the last episode, I mentioned WWE's use of celebrities. If you're watching an episode of Raw, SmackDown, or a premium live event, you may see celebrities in the crowd. Now, this is a strategic move by the WWE as they use celebrities to get more eyes on the product. And the key reason for WWE social media dominance is their insane production. Because WWE is a large corporation, they are able to mass produce content every single day. For example, on WWE's YouTube channel, you will see content such as full-length matches, weekly show recaps, podcasts, compilations, short-form clips taken from weekly shows, and interviews. WWE repurposes their content from their weekly shows and distributes it to other platforms in many different forms. I'll talk more about this in the next episode, so stay tuned. You do not have to post content on every single platform every single day in order to be successful, especially if you're just getting started. Here's the first lesson. Before you look into brand deals and collaborations, make sure that you are building your brand. Now, this can and will take time. WWE built their brand over decades before they gained long-term advertisers and inked major deals with streaming platforms. Here are a few actionable tips if you are just getting started. Clarify your brand. Ask yourself, why did I start? Who am I here for? What is a problem in my niche that others are not addressing? How can I solve problems different than what others are doing? These questions will provide clarity as you are starting. Now, here's the thing. Doing things differently may seem difficult when there are so many ideas and perspectives out there, but you're already different by design. No one is the same. And as I was told growing up, dare to be different. To give your brand further clarity, make a list of 3 to 5 core values that you want your brand to be about. For my business, Empowered to Create, my core values are empowerment, where I help people develop the confidence and tools to own their brand and tell their story. Faith and resilience, showing that setbacks aren't endings, they're setups for something greater. Education and strategy, I'm teaching people how to build a brand, not just what looks good. Creativity with purpose, every design, strategy, and session has meaning behind it. And lastly, authentic long-term growth, building sustainably even if it's slower. No fluff, just real long-term results. And also, that leads me to my next point, thinking long-term. It may seem like going viral overnight is the key to success, but the chances of that happening are very rare. Most successful creators have built their brand over a long period of time. So instead of focusing on how many followers you have on social media and going viral, focus on building meaningful connections with your audience. You can do this by simply showing up as yourself and consistently delivering value. WWE built a long-term connection with their audience through compelling storylines and larger-than-life characters before the advertisers and sponsors came running to them. Now, the third tip is to build your own platform. With constant algorithm shifts and platform updates, you don't want to rely solely on social media to grow your brand, because the success of your brand should not rest on the shoulders of Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, etc. Now, you can build your own platform by launching a newsletter, a paid or free community, and or creating a website. All right, let's talk more about the Netflix opportunity. Since 2023, we've seen Netflix expand into live content, from big sporting events like the highly anticipated and underwhelming Mike Tyson and Jake Paul fight last November. You got NFL games on Netflix, you got comedy specials like Chris Rock's Selective Outrage, and much more. Other platforms like the previously mentioned Peacock have already been doing live content. Netflix was just late to the party. Better late than never, right? And live content is where WWE comes in naturally. WWE had already been producing weekly shows for the USA Network and Fox, and them transitioning to Netflix made perfect sense. In January 2024, WWE put pen to paper by signing a $5 billion deal with Netflix over a 10-year period, which would bring WWE's flagship show, Monday Night Raw, to Netflix exclusively. Also, all other WWE shows such as SmackDown, NXT, and premium live events would make the jump to Netflix air outside of the US. And when I first heard about WWE moving to Netflix, I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit surprised. For decades, WWE had been producing content for cable television first, and it was what fans were used to. Even though a lot of people have moved from cable TV to streaming. And international fans who were also Netflix subscribers were excited about the change because it made WWE content more accessible to them since Peacock is US only. However, some fans have expressed their frustrations at Netflix for only having a select amount of WWE content compared to Peacock and the WWE network. Netflix currently does not have every episode of Raw, SmackDown, and NXT and classic episodes of WWE programming, and this frustration is very justified. The WWE network had nearly every piece of content ever produced by WWE, and a lot of WWE fans believe in preserving wrestling history, and they can't go back and revisit classic moments. And WWE's pivot from live cable television to streaming is a key indicator of an ongoing trend. Over the years, cable television has been slowly dying. More and more people are now watching movies, TV shows, and live sports mainly through streaming services. Now, the key lesson in this is for you to be ready to pivot when necessary and understand what your audience wants. The way we consume content is rapidly changing, and what worked in 2019 may not work today. And who knows how we'll be consuming content 10 years from now. Social media platforms are constantly changing with new features and algorithm changes. What I've learned is that we have to start approaching these platforms like media-first platforms instead of social platforms. Social media in recent years has become less social and more media-driven. People use social media for entertainment, information, or both. And they're more likely to consume videos and less likely to interact with other users. Now, I can attest to this because I rarely interact with others on social media. I mainly just watch videos. I don't know, maybe there's just an introvert in me, but I'm not gonna lie to y'all. It can be very overwhelming to keep up with all these platform changes, algorithm shifts, and what your audience wants. That's where I come in. If you are struggling to keep up with these constant changes, I'm here to help you create a simple plan to find your ideal customers on the right platforms. I offer guidance on how you can use social media to reach more customers and clients so you can grow your business without stressing out and getting lost in these social media streets. Link in the description below. Now, despite Netflix's WWE library not being as deep as the WWE Network/Peacock libraries, the WWE Netflix deal can still be looked at as a masterclass in collaboration because it's a win-win for both sides. WWE capitalized on the shift in audience behavior from TV to streaming and partnered with the #1 streaming platform in the world to maximize their global reach. Netflix gains a part of WWE's loyal audience and a library of live and on-demand content. And it's important for us to see both the positives and negatives to show that collaboration isn't always easy, and not everyone will be on board with change. As previously mentioned, not all WWE content is available on Netflix at the moment, and the split between US and international rights for shows like Raw, NXT, and SmackDown means that fans in the US may need multiple subscriptions to access everything they want, which is very, very frustrating. Also, the WWE Netflix deal puts a lot of pressure on Peacock and other streaming platforms to innovate or risk getting left behind in the live sports and entertainment space. So let's summarize this. All right, so the strengths and weaknesses of the collaboration are that you have global reach and scale, but the content is not fully available on Netflix. Even though you have a long-term stable partnership, you still fragment the audience because the content that US users get and the content that global users get are different. Even though you're leveraging both brands' core strengths, you still have fan concerns about access and experience. This just goes to show that change isn't always welcome. To wrap things up, the main takeaways from this video are to clarify your brand, think long-term, build your platform, and pivot when necessary. WWE spent years building their brand, which allowed them to gain these major streaming deals. The The most important thing for us to know when it comes to getting these brand deals and collaborations are making sure that these brands are aligned with their audience and core values. If you don't, you risk losing your audience. If you ignore them, they will skewer you. That shows the importance of listening to your audience. For decades, WWE has been the blueprint in content creation, and their new Netflix series, WWE Unreal, proves it. So we start off with an intro from WWE's Chief Content Officer, Paul Triple H Levesque, basically just describing how complex producing a WWE show can be. WWE works 24/7, 365 days a year, which has been their standard for as long as they have existed. And see, here's the thing. Many people tend to underestimate just how complicated and demanding that professional wrestling can be. Now let's talk about Cody Rhodes, who is the current WWE Undisputed Champion as of the time of filming this video. And he is the perfect example of authenticity. In WWE Unreal, there's a quote from Cody Rhodes that says, "I am myself. I play myself." And his role is the babyface. He is the ultimate good guy. He is the current face of the company. And it has been difficult for Cody Rhodes to play the face of the company because nowadays people draw towards the bad guys. In the professional wrestling world, people are in favor of heels, which is bad guys, more so than the good guys. They think that the good guys are too cookie cutter, they're too bland, they're too boring. Whereas the heels, the bad guys, are more interesting to watch. And also, WWE Unreal gives us an inside look into the writer's room as they prepare for the January 6th Netflix premiere. And in the last video, I talked about WWE's $5 billion Netflix deal. You guys can go and check that out if you haven't already. A quote that really stood out to me was from Chief Content Officer Triple H, and it says, "The bigger the star, the more you want to provide scarcity for their star power. And this is all about protecting their stars." They kept the status of WWE Champion Cody Rhodes unknown for the Netflix premiere so that when it happened, the fan reaction was greater. And WWE also takes a long-form approach to their content. They plan out their storylines months in advance. January 6th is the start of a new season for WWE with the Raw Netflix premiere. And they call this the Road to WrestleMania. And that season caps off at WrestleMania, which is the biggest show of the year. And also in WWE Unreal, they touched on John Cena's retirement run. If you know, John Cena is retiring this year. 2025 is his last year as a professional wrestler. He will be acting in Hollywood full time. And another quote that really stood out to me in WWE Unreal was a quote from John Cena, which said, "We can write and choreograph whatever we want back here. You have to be ready for the element that you cannot control, which is the audience." And that was probably the biggest quote of episode 1. And this is really important for all you content creators like myself. This is really important because we have to be willing to listen to our audience and be willing to adapt to what they want to see. And also, you got to be willing to adapt to changes in trends. Like what worked in 2021 may not work in 2025. So you have to keep your foot on the gas. And I know that can be pretty exhausting. And John Cena also said, that shows the importance of listening to your audience. Let's move on to Rhea Ripley, who is one of the top stars in WWE right now. She basically describes her character as herself turned up 10 times. If you're not familiar with Rhea Ripley, her character is very dominant, very aggressive, very chaotic, scary, yet attractive. And she said that it's the sides of her that she would get arrested for in real life. And she admits that she does have moments where she gets nervous right before her matches, before she walks through that curtain. And once her music hits, Rhea Ripley comes out. And she's ready to raise hell. And this WWE Unreal also touched on the Rhea, Liv Morgan, Dominic Mysterio love triangle, which was one of the biggest storylines of this past year and a half. Rhea had to surrender her Women's World Championship because she got injured. And injuries can also affect how storylines play out. When a wrestler gets hurt, the creative team has to work around that. They have to find a workaround to them being off because they have to take off. If the wrestler is injured, they have to take time off to recover from their injury, which can delay the storyline. And also, Rhea Ripley was going over her match against Liv Morgan on the January 6th Netflix premiere with fellow WWE superstar Damian Priest. And they were basically talking about how Rhea wanted to do all of these cool, elaborate spots in the match, and Damian was kind of like, hey, less is more. Less is more. You don't need to do a bunch of complicated things, just as long as the story is presentable. Now we move on to CM Punk, who is one of the most popular and most controversial characters in the WWE. And CM Punk's character, he's all punk rock, he's straight edge, he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't do drugs. He has that straight edge punk rock lifestyle. That's who CM Punk really is. He's very brash, he's very outspoken, he doesn't mind letting you know how he feels. And CM Punk has talked about his frustrations with Triple H for not main eventing WrestleMania in his initial WWE run, which was from 2006 to 2014. And during this time, Triple H's role would shift from a full-time wrestler to management, so he had more say-so. In this episode, there was a callback to CM Punk's infamous 2011 Pipe Bomb promo, which is one of the most talked about promos of all time. People still talk about that promo to this day. And that was Phil Brooks, CM Punk's real name. That was Phil Brooks speaking through CM Punk. And that was when the line between fiction and reality was blurred. The best storylines always had that element of reality in them, right? CM Punk has recently came back. He talked about how he walked out, and he came back at Survivor Series 2023, and also his history with Seth Rollins. That was one of the top storylines heading into the Netflix premiere. And this is an ongoing storyline currently because they cannot stand each other. There is a deep, long-term storyline going on between them. Now let's touch base on the gorilla position. Now what the gorilla position is, it's basically the main hub where the content is produced. It is the area that talent goes through right before they get to the ring. And it's basically the production studio where the show is ran. You have Triple H, who is the chief content officer. You have Bruce Pritchard, the executive producer. You have a timekeeper. You have a match producer who produces the matches and who is basically the liaison between talent and creative. And the producers are often former wrestlers. And communication and timing are vital to the success of the show because the producers have to communicate with the referees, who then communicate with the wrestlers as the match is going on. And also, each match and segment has strict time constraints. However, with your content, there is no such thing as time constraints. You can do long form or short form content. And the gorilla position is a dedicated space for producing the WWE content. So I want to ask you, let me know in the comments, what is your gorilla position? All right, so to wrap this thing up, the key insights is to be authentic. We learned that from Cody Rhodes and CM Punk. Have a long form approach to your content. We learned that from the creative team and planning ahead, listening and adapting to what your audience wants. Also, less is more, and having a dedicated space for producing your content like the gorilla position. WWE Unreal isn't just behind the scenes drama. It is a masterclass in building content that lasts. If you're ready to take these lessons and actually apply them to your brand, that is what I help creators do. Hit that subscribe button, and if no one else told you, you matter. You were put on this earth to be great.